is. And now I'm hearing a humongous echo on my end. I'm sorry, everybody.
It's weird. I'm going to kill my camera just for bandwidth reasons. To get more
I was
people.
just about to suggest that very thing. With more people in here, I'm going to kill my camera. So, bye. Love y'all.
So
you saw my spiders, so it's good. I'm going to turn them off.
I've been working, so I've not had a chance to keep up with the flat Earth debates like I was used to, where I could tune in to at least 1, 2 if I was lucky, and just catch everything live as it happened. And now I don't even have time to catch them on the replays.
Yeah,
So
I remember last time we spoke, you were talking about this new job and how it was probably going to be a bad idea. And I said, you're going to burn yourself out, man. I'm guessing you're on your way to happily burning yourself out.
I am. I think we've decided that come December, we're going to drop Tuesdays over there on Truth Frequency Radio. We're doing Tuesdays and Fridays now. So we'll drop Tuesdays and then pick up Mondays and Wednesdays and go 3 days a week over there, I think.
Wow.
This man not only burns the candle at both ends, he takes a flamethrower to it.
Guys, I know I do maths. I'm the guy that gets thrust to go look at that maths head. But Josh,
yeah,
right? This is like baller maths. We're going to have to go through here, son. I know you drop in Tuesdays. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're picking up Mondays and Wednesdays.
Exactly. Yes.
That should be a lot easier. Good on you. Good life choice.
But it works really well as long as you can map it on a globe with a presupposed radius. Then everything works out perfectly. So I have nothing to worry about.
So you're planning on
You are
doing
assuming the sphere going in, right?
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, yeah?
That's the plan. We're going to expand our reach. We're getting so
Downsizing.
much love now that we're just going to blow out.
And I'll either put myself in an early grave or end up adding a 4th day. I don't know.
I'll see a 7-day week show coming. Start your day with Iron Realm.
We've got the master of a 7-day week show with us.
Do we not? If there's anybody to learn from, this guy, the power.
How do you keep it up, pal?
No, just get into a routine a bit. It's 12 months to the day tomorrow. So I've done 12 months solid every single day.
Congratulations, friend. My goodness. That's epic. That is truly epic. My goodness.
12 months daily streaming. But that was kind of what I'd set out to do. So I was like, no, I'm going to do daily streams. That's my ambition. That's what I'll do. I'll stick
How's
to
your
it.
blood pressure?
Fine.
Good.
I'm sure it's excellent with all the venting he gets to do on a daily basis. He gets it out. Some of us have to chew it down because we have to be nice on the air.
Cool as a cucumber the rest of the time. I get to shout at globeheads and call them idiots. It's great.
Exactly, right. That has to be satisfying.
That's what I do in my shed. I go away, scream and shout, and then come back and compose a well-reasoned, polite reply. But yeah, I can see the... is it catharsism or something?
Yeah, it is. It's cathartic. Very cathartic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
because the best one is when they say, you call them an idiot, and they say, that's an ad hominem attack. You go, no. That's not an ad hominem attack. I've literally pointed out your fallacious argument and its idiocy in terms of your reasoning. Therefore, the logical conclusion is that you are an idiot. It's not an ad hominem attack.
and idiot is in the law dictionary, is it not, Riley?
I don't know. I haven't seen my law dictionary for about 15 years. It might be.
Shit, I'll have
Better
to
get the
look it up
bugger
now.
out.
That's a total lie. We looked up evidence about 4 times because your memory is absolutely like sick.
Do you know, I can't remember things that happened last week, but I can remember things that happened like 20 years ago.
Well,
sure there's a condition name
welcome
for that
to
book.
my world, Riley.
Yeah.
Let's have a test of that memory. So, what is evidence?
Oh, we're not doing this right now. Come on.
Go on, what is evidence?
I can't remember what the conclusion of it was.
Proof.
So evidence and proof were interchangeable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember us doing that. I don't remember what the conclusion was.
Evidence and proof are synonyms.
That's interesting, and that's from a legal point of view. Is that the same for in a scientific sort of point of view?
Well,
do you know?
To be honest, I don't agree with what Nathan's just said.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
wasn't what I was taught.
Well, just look it up in the dictionary.
And evidence is a fact, and therefore whether it supports your theory, hypothesis, whichever way it does, it's kind of irrelevant whether it lends support to your argument. If it's evidence, then it should be factually correct. Therefore, it is a proof. A proof as to what is kind of for conjecture, but it's still a proof, isn't it?
There's different levels of evidence, though, aren't there?
That's what I got taught. I got taught that evidence furnishes proof. Proof is the conclusion or the accumulation of evidence, because there are many evidences to a crime, but it doesn't mean that there are many proofs. But the way Nathan found this interpretation, and we did go over it, and I had to agree with him in the end that it was the same word. Although I don't really remember doing it, but I do vaguely remember doing it. But I was always told that, for example, if there's only the one crime, right, there's a burglary, right, or there's a robbery, or there's a bank robbery, you will get like 20 different pieces of evidence from, say, 10 pieces of witness statements, and then gunpowder residue, and all these other bits of pieces of evidence, and they all furnish the proof. Overall, the proof was, yeah, he did do it, and the verdict would be based on whatever evidence is, and then it would be deemed proof that he did, because it was all of them combined together. But when Nathan looked it up, and you'll have to tell them, Nathan, I can't remember what the conclusion was, but I do remember it vaguely.
Well, basically, the conclusion is that if you look at some of the other terminology, so most of them have got a prefix, it will describe how it's not evidence, or how it will be dismissed as not being evidence, or how it's not good evidence. And the overriding theme is that when you actually get to the just evidence, just the word evidence on its own, that's when it means it's proving something. And if it's put before a judge for the sake of argument, they'd look at it and then say, no, this is not good evidence. It can be dismissed as evidence because it's not furnishing proof. In other words, if the two are synonyms, proof and evidence. But we're not talking about that. We're talking of something totally different, which is scientific evidence, which is a totally different standard altogether again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've learned quite a lot recently. Well, I mean, the thing that I learned was that, I'm not going to say who, but I learned that there was this thing called a concept, which I didn't realize was actually like, it was so broad that it covers literally everything. And if you describe something as a concept, usually it's because you don't have the tangible evidence to prove that it's tangible or physical or real. So you would describe it conceptually. And I think we all use it in that context. But when you look up the definition of concept, it means literally anything once it's been formed in the mind. So, like, we can talk about the desk that your PC keyboard sat on. And obviously, I can't see your desk, right? I don't know what your desk looks like, but I can imagine what your desk might look like based on how you describe it. So then that becomes a concept of your desk. Even though your desk actually exists and it's real and it's tangible, it's still a concept because it's only in my mind, even though it is a physical object. But obviously, that creates a bit of a problem, because if we're describing a tree, you can all imagine what a tree looks like, right? That would be conceptual. You're making this thing called tree in your mind, but you don't know what it actually looks like, because we're talking about one particular tree. So unless that tree gets brought into reality with pictures and evidence to prove that it's a real tree, then you only have a concept of this tree. Yet we all know that trees are real, right? They're not conceptual by their nature. They're tangible. They're real. You can touch them. But it muddies the water, and I described it as raping language. When somebody just started to describe stuff that was defined in science or in biology or whatever, when someone starts describing something that's got definition, and in this case it was the word force, I believe, you can't call it a concept just because you don't really like the definition that's being presented to you, because it basically rapes the meaning of language. It removes the finite nature and the precision of the language used when describing force to call it a concept.
They want to say it. Let me say it. It's called the reverse reification fallacy.
Yeah, we've made it up because reification is when you have something that doesn't actually exist and you have to describe it conceptually. So, for example, Arwin would talk about his concept of gravity, and we would realize that, once he disclaims it, that it's a concept, right? But if you're going to call a tree a concept, but we all know that trees exist, then you're reversing what is basically making something into a concept because it's not really there. Well, you're making something that is really there into a concept, but it actually does exist. So we've had to call it the reverse reification fallacy, because one particular guy wants to describe everything as conceptual when there are tangible objects that don't need to be conceptualized, and he does it just because, in my opinion, it rapes the meaning of words. It's bad.
Wow, I actually kept up with you there.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's bad that I was like, look, we have a specific meaning for this word. Why would you want to conceptualize it with a really broad definition that means nothing when we have a precise meaning that means something specific? And the answer appears to be because he wants to be bloody awkward. But that's because, I don't know. I don't know whether it was his word of the week or whatever. He's just learnt it. But reification fallacy was my most recent recent discovery, and it seems to apply everywhere in heliocentricity.
It's Marxist, isn't it? As far as I know.
I don't know where it comes from,
The
but I love it.
Yeah. No, I came across it today. In fact,
Nathan, with that, because I'll admit at that one, I watched your show with Quantum. Have you seen that, John? By the way, the one in the week with regards to fallacies. I'm sure if you haven't, you'll enjoy it. But that was the one that I struggled with a bit. So the way I'm getting that one is, we talk about a map, as if it's real, and therefore we think that whatever on the map we state is factually correct.
Yeah, it's much easier with science.
And therefore,
So science says, that's the easiest reification fallacy to describe. Science doesn't say anything. It's a methodology. So when people say, well, the current science is this, or the science says that, the body of science this, science feels that. No, science doesn't have feelings. It's not a person. That's a reification. You're making it into a person, something real, something with lips.
I actually think that's a really good example of where one could be lazy, even though it is a reification to say, well, science does say this. When the point's not contentious, I think it's okay to be a bit lazy and say that, because we all know what's meant by it. But when it's important and the point needs to be described with precision, I don't think that you can get away with saying, well, the whole body of science says this on a contentious point, because you can't be lazy when it comes to the meanings of words in contentious matters, and that's what happens with one or two ballers.
Don't you find, Riley, that almost every single debate about the ball, it reverts into a sort of semantics, drilling down into the details of words and things like this, where level doesn't mean level anymore. And
well, that's where it overlaps with law so much, because how many legal matters come down to the precise meaning of words? Yeah, and ultimately, you can put a negative connotation to the meaning of semantics, but semantics is the opposing word to moot. So you have moot that's not contentious, where you're talking about something, you're debating the merits of a particular point, but it's not contentious. So it's like, it's just for the fun of it, really. You're just trying to distinguish a particular point. You're not going to fall out over it. It's not that big of a deal. That's moot. But obviously contentious, when it is important, it is semantics. It is discussing the minutiae of words, because words do have meaning. And in both law and in science, you've got to have these meanings with some element of precision. Otherwise, you're just going to end up confusing people. And if you use words out of context, I mean, we all do it. We interchange words that might not be precise, but makes the point. We do it when we're amongst friends, and specifically you didn't mean that word, but you compensate for them because it's not that important. So you didn't really mean that word, but it's not contentious. But when it is contentious, these words have meanings, and one of the best examples is the word force. I mean, you can find 10 different meanings for the word force. There isn't one collective meaning for that one word. So you have to work out, well, in this context, what does force actually mean? Because you can find it, there's numerous different ways. I mean, there's a mathematical expression, F equals ma. There's a normal science physics explanation, but then you can find another one that's similar but not the same. And you end up like, well, what is the meaning of the word force?
Well, it's convoluted. It's the same with the word point. I think that there is no agreed upon definition of the word point. But this is where definitions come into play, isn't it? And why it's so important to agree on definitions before the debate even starts, because otherwise, from my experience, is that people have so many different definitions of what you think is logical and normal, and then you find out 250 tweets later that they don't think up is up or down is down. It's just
Well, PMARS joined the other day, and he literally gave a definition of what I thought he was describing was inertia, but he was describing mass. And he came in and he said it's the an object's the object's resistance to move, or something of that nature. And I was like, that's not mass, that's inertia. And he says, no, it's mass. And I was like, it's not, that's inertia. A body's reluctance to move is inertia. And when we looked it up on Wikipedia, sure enough, he was reading from Wikipedia, and what he was describing was mass. And I thought, that's not bloody mass. Mass is how much matter there is in an object, right? That's what I was taught. But now he's got this new concept, this new definition that I've not heard of. And then when we cross-referenced it with what inertia was, the meanings of the definitions were both identical. And we had the whole show on whether or not they were the same or not. And they were the same. And it's like, what the hell does mass mean then? You can't have mass meaning saying one thing but meaning the opposite as well. You can't have two meanings for the word mass. It's one thing or it's not. But apparently there seems to be two meanings for the word mass.
It's part of the con.
It is. I agree.
Okay, so zetetically there is no difference. There is no. You can pick whichever word. It's the same thing. Weight and mass, for all intensive purposes, measurably, they are the same thing. We try to pretend mathematically that they're different, but for all purposes of reality, and certainly for my profession, there is no difference. Whether we're talking moles, kilograms, whatever, it's all the same thing. It never varies. It is static. It's just another wave of the magician's hand.
You can't get away from it either, because the meanings of words is important in language. If you say one thing, it means what you say. It doesn't mean like a similar but different meaning. Because there are words that like you can interchange, but they don't really mean the same thing. And it's sloppy language, but we do it just to make the point, right? But if the point's contentious and then someone says, hang on a minute, I don't actually mean that way, I mean it this way. And then you look at the meanings, and you can't get around it. Unfortunately, language is that way that we all interpret these words. Some of that's
done on purpose. Some of that's done on, like, by design, like birth being the day you were born versus birthing a ship and that whole thing with legality and nautical stuff. We're kind of actually talking about that a bit in chat as well with language. So that'll be a whole different show if we get off on spelling and things like that. Let's just keep where it is. My bad.
Yeah, and obviously the more you get into this conversation and you realise that there is a con going on here. I mean, for example, Rumpus came in and he tried to give some mathematical explanation for neutral buoyancy. And mathematics is supposed to be a representation of what, reality, the world in which we see. And his maths didn't match the definition. So I pointed it out because he'd added little g, obviously, and he added m. That wasn't there. It might have been volume. It was either mass or volume he'd added. But basically, the definition of neutral buoyancy was the density of the object relative to the density of the medium it's in. That's all it was. But he'd put in two extra little bits that weren't there in the definition. Maths is supposed to represent reality, but you'd put in these extra little bits that weren't there in the definition. Why would you do that? And basically, he did it because either he was trying to deceive us or he was doing what he was taught. But either way, it didn't match the definition. So when I pointed that out, he said, "Oh, so you're just being a moron." Well, actually, no. These things have meanings, and we've got to kind of work at what these words actually mean, because maths is supposed to be an expression of reality. And if you're putting in different parts to reality that aren't really there, that's a problem. And that's what he was doing.
No, Tony, have you sort of seen what I've been seeing recently of people going away from the word buoyancy and using just simple relative density for both buoyancy and density? Have you seen that?
Relative, yeah, I've been pushing that because the word relative is the key word. Relative density or relative buoyancy is basically the same thing but the opposite. And I'm all right with that so long as the word relative's in it, because if you say it's just density and buoyancy, that's only half of it.
Yeah.
That word relative does need to be there, because then you're going to cross-reference it with something else. It's not in isolation.
Yeah. No, that's
Do you agree?
cool. Yeah, I do agree. I think relative density is there's no buoyancy has always been a difficult one for me. It's always I don't know, it hasn't quite covered what I've been trying to say. I think relative density, as in you're more dense than the surrounding medium or you're less dense than the surrounding medium, is a far more succinct way of putting it, and a less ambiguous way for them to pick holes in it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the
I don't see it that way, guys. Go on,
say the way they get around that on the heliocentric side of it is to, in the most literal way, suck the relative difference bit out of the equation. So they stick the whole thing in a vacuum chamber, and then there is no relative difference. They just suck the medium out completely, and then you've got no difference between anything.
What were you going to say, Adam?
I see the two things as slightly different. The buoyant force is the expression of what density causes. So it's the buoyancy that is the force that we're describing, and behind that, the reasoning is the relative densities. I don't necessarily see them as opposite. I see them more as a synonymous thing of how it works more than.
As long as the word relative's there, I think that's the key bit, because once you put relative there, as long as you understand the concept of relative beings and relative things, then you can't really go wrong, I don't think. Once that word's in there.
It's that relativeness that's important. I think that's the word. I think we're all waiting for Paul on the Plane and Noxie to bring out, which will show that relativeness. But there was a bit this afternoon, I think I caught on Nathan's show, where you were talking about the effects of dropping items in a vacuum, and it got onto the point I've been pondering for a long time. At that point, the supposed equalization of 9.8 is caused by the air. Normally, in a vacuum, that disappears. Then, therefore, the only supposed downward cause, if we've removed this buoyancy to neutralize any relative densities, is this, if it did exist, this gravitational force. Yet we see this contradiction again, where everything falls at the same rate. So if that's the case, then that to me is a contradiction, that the supposed gravity force is in some way related to mass, because if you do remove any stabilizing outward forces such as atmosphere, then the only forces at play are the mass forces. Therefore, a heavier massed item should have a greater attraction between it and the center of the Earth.
This is where the rumpus would interrupt straight away and say, mass isn't a force, weight is a force. And obviously, the only difference between the two concepts is G.
Well, it's to introduce G. The only reason, this is what I say, the two things in reality are the same thing.
Yeah.
They try to differentiate it, and they remove the kilograms, multiply it by G, and give you this pseudo unit called a Newton, which is only it's only there to introduce G. It serves no purpose. Once you get to the end of the calculation and you want to work things out, you have to convert back from newtons back into kilograms.
Adam,
so that it makes sense.
Bollock newtons, please.
Bollock newtons. So I'm a fucking amateur. Sorry.
See, there's two responses to when the rumpus says that. Well, actually, there's two responses generally. For everything that goes down, and I say that word loosely, there is an equal and opposite reaction according to Newton's third law, where something else goes back up. Now, it doesn't really matter what that something else going back up is. The fact is that something else goes back up, and it's a balancing act, right? But we always forget about the second half of it, because we see the brick going down, but we don't see the same volume of air going back up again. So that's a balancing act, right? For me, that's an equal and opposite reaction, a balancing act. But we only ever focus on the part that we see. But there's another part, according to Newton, that is equal and opposite. By that definition, makes, well, only 50% of the statement's true. in that gravity pulls everything down. Well, if gravity does exist, it also sends something else going back up the other way. So it's like that makes half of the argument immediately. 50% of it's become, well, it's not accurate anymore to say that things go down because there's something else going back up the other way. And the second thing to add to that is that Newton himself in the Principia stated that basically he makes no hypothesis for the force of gravitation. He was unable to prove this force of gravitation in the phenomena that he observes. And when you look at the Latin and it gets translated, you have to kind of give a little bit of leeway for the possibility of inaccurate translation, plus the prose that was used back in the 16th century, 17th century, to as to what he was actually meaning. But what he basically says, I was unable to prove cause for this downwards acceleration force or gravitation force, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't prove it. So he believes it's there, but he kind of like literally not disclaims. But
can I interrupt there and just ask Nathan to make a statement on that? That's quite an important thing you say there, Andy. So we have Newton making. You just read the statement he says again, Nathan, and you evaluate that scientifically.
So he says hypothesis non fingo, roughly translated. I make no hypothesis. For gravitation, obviously, specifically for gravitation. Hypothesis non fingo.
Well, let me put it into its more easy to understand. It says, but hitherto, I have not been able to discover the cause of those properties of gravity from the phenomena, and I frame no hypothesis. So basically, he's not been able to discover the cause of these properties of gravity. So if you can't prove cause of gravity, right, you're not proving gravity. That's the way I read it. I'm not saying that's the way to read it, but what I'm saying is that
that's the way I read it, Anthony, that you've got a clear, concise statement from Newton himself, saying that he has not been able to identify any cause.
Correct.
And I'll hand over to Nation then. What in a scientific experiment statement of any nature, cause is the fundamental principle, surely, mate.
Yeah, the independent variable. So the thing that you must vary and manipulate in order to establish it as a scientific cause, i.e. your experimental stage would validate that you can vary and manipulate as either the cause, or you get your null difference, i.e. it's not the cause. You get zero difference. You validate your null. But yeah, you're trying to vary and manipulate it. We had a guy on the show the other day we took him through the baby steps of literally an apple falling from a tree. It's like, right, there's my effect. There's my observed phenomena. Apple falls from tree. And when you establish with him, well, what is causing that? The answer from Johnny Globehead is gravity. It's like, oh, yeah. Well, how are you going to vary and manipulate gravity? That's why there's no hypothesis for it. You cannot hypothesize this. It's not capable of scientific prediction. And Newton himself disclaims that. He makes no hypothesis. And to say he makes a hypothesis, you have to define what a hypothesis is. Hypothesis is a scientific prediction. So he cannot make a scientific prediction about gravitation. It can't be formulated into a scientific prediction. It's not science. That's the end of the statement. He can't make a hypothesis.
From my research with Newton, he was actually quite scathing about gravity and its capabilities, and he even went to the point of saying that, you know, gravity at a distance, such as planets and things like this, was an absurdity, and he hoped his name was never linked with it. I don't know. We've had those quotes on the show before, but does anyone remember all of that? Because I can't find it, obviously.
Not offhand. I mean, I vaguely remember something about it.
It appears to me, and I don't know enough about Newton to say that this is true, but by that sentence that we just read out, I have not been able to discover the cause of those properties of gravity from phenomena. That tells me that he probably died. They probably raped all his life work and then represented it after his death. Now, I might be wrong, but we've seen that happen before with people upon death. They become famous, especially in science. And you wonder why. Why is it upon death did they become? And it's probably because they've raped the meanings of what their work was.
that's the poignant point of his statement, mate. Okay, so afterwards and for history, his work on gravity is portrayed as scientific evidence. Okay, but we have a clear statement from the man himself stating that he can find no cause.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, as far as I'm aware, cause is the fundamental principle you're trying to find in any scientific experiment.
Yeah.
So most fundamentally, he's stating in his own words, not other people's written after him, that as far as the gravitational force, he finds no scientific explanation or validation for it.
Yeah.
It's a quite clear statement.
Now, obviously, we would never have come across this unless we've been like focusing on it so much. And obviously, that focus has really come from Arwin, because he argues gravity better than most of the ballers do. And because he genuinely believes it. I think some of the ballers don't even believe it, and that's why they're not that keen on it. But Arwin argues it vehemently. And by standing his ground, it makes you go a little bit further. And I mean, the further you look into it and the more you realize, actually, it appears that this guy, he probably is turning in his grave right now at the way that people are quoting him, because it appears that if you can't discover the cause of these properties of gravity from phenomena, you're kind of saying that there is no gravity. You're saying something else. But everybody, I tell you something, right? I think the confusion comes from his first law of motion, which states that, and this is probably a misrepresentation as well, to be honest. I'm going to check it to see whether it has been misrepresented. But his first law states that an object will remain at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. But that word force is in that first law of Newton's laws of motion. So the word force, like, is because of the definitions, and you can find numerous definitions, some that support you, some that don't. It's one of those words that seems to have been muddied, and they need this force of gravity. But his first law of motion states that it requires a force. So they've needed to make gravity a force to make this work, or that's actually the misrepresentation. So unfortunately, the rest of his work is like, I tend to agree with most of his work that I've seen so far, but that first law requires a movement to be a force, yet we don't see any force when things move. Not always. I mean, yeah, you can push a car or you can pull a car, but when there's a little happy tomato in a layer that's of density that's equal to the density of the little happy tomato and it doesn't move, and then you tinker with that little layer, that medium that the tomato's in, and then you can make it move up, then that's not actually a force. So you need to make that a force for it to be gravity, but the definition of force doesn't support it because it needs to have an interaction, a push or a pull. Well, there's nothing interacting with it. It's like,
I think this has been hyperbole far too much, because you've made it complicated after the bit that you needed to stop at, which is their argument falls apart when it gets neutrally buoyant. At the point that everything is at zero, at that point, when you look at the mathematics, you see that all of these little g's that have been interacting with the maths unnecessarily don't do anything.
They cancel out.
Yeah, they cancel out.
The point, they don't cancel out, and this is the point mathematically. What they try to pretend is they cancel out. Now, the bit I see is that in their world, you've got gravity pulling down, and they try to pretend that you've got buoyancy pushing up. They're opposing forces. Now, that would be fine. So what you would have is a container in water would go so far up and sit so far in the water based on the opposition of the buoyancy upwards, I'm trying to stay American, and the gravity pulling down. When you have neutral buoyancy, there is no upward force. Okay, it's neutral. So there is no opposing force, as the Rumpus would describe. There is nothing pushing it up. They're the same density. There is no force in action. So therefore, logically, conversely, there can't be any negative force the other way if there's nothing to be negative against. Forget their need for them to try and oppose these forces. There isn't a force to oppose in the first place because it's neutrally buoyant. They're the same. There is no buoyancy force in action.
Yeah, they gave this tug of war scenario where they said, yeah, you got two blokes either side pulling the rope in the middle, but in this little cherry tomato that's not moving, there's no rope. So you got to argue that there's a force there, right? but you can't. There's no force. So how are you going to argue for a force that doesn't actually exist? You can't prove it. There isn't
Sorry,
one. Nobody would say there is one.
Just while we're still on Newton, though, could it be the case that that's perhaps where Newton was one step ahead of the people that ended up utilising his work? A bit like Brahe saying, well, they'd have to be enormous. You know what I mean? It's a bit like that.
Possibly. But it begs the question, well, has all of his work been undermined by virtue of his death? Because this would never have been able to happen during his life. So was it because he died and then they've twisted it all?
To stay in theme, I would describe it as historical quote mining, Nathan.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say that if the history of Newton and his background and everything is to be believed, then he was a very connected member, should I say. And I think it was back in a day where it was under such scrutiny, things like what he published, that he didn't have the gall to say, look, this is a fact, this is real, he had to start his book off with the word if, and say he had nothing to do with gravity if it was gravity at a distance and all this sort of stuff. Same as Copernicus, wasn't it? His book didn't get published till he died, and then it was backed by the Vatican and
Correct.
everything. But I think still Copernicus and Newton were very connected people in the world of whatever you want to call it.
Copernicus jailed? Wasn't he jailed for his shifting of the whole thing around? I mean, until he was. That's the point. He died, right? That's what I thought. I remember
all of these stories where we rewrite the words of historical figures and their findings. All of these stories come with apologetics, in terms of they didn't utter it because of the Spanish, because of the Catholic Church, this, that, and the other. There's always a reason why, even though in this case Newton's words are quite clear, if you read the man's words, that actually no, he didn't mean that, to support the direction, the narrative they wish.
The other part of this is this game didn't just begin with us waking up to flat Earth. I mean, there have been people, I'm sure, awake, seeing what's going on around them throughout history, who came forward and tried to show people what the hell was really going on, and were just as controlled and just as, has much disinformation and everything else heaped onto their real work they may have been trying to do. I'm not giving anybody apologetics here. I'm just saying there's as much control of this information back then as there is what we see daily here,
Well, but they can skew the narrative. So what they did with Newton in terms of gravity was, whenever we talk about it, we always talk about it as Newtonian Cavendish gravity, because there's the distinction between that and Einsteinian, which isn't necessarily what I want to talk about tonight. But you've got this introduction of a quasi-scientific experiment, which is a seriously loaded term in the debate, because it's not an experiment, it's not scientific, but it's punted as such because it's a contraption that does something. And I don't know honestly how long you guys have been around in flat Earth, but when I first came to it, the Cavendish experiment was being exposed to this community, or flat Earth community, as the joke that it is.
I remember John Le Bon did a video ridiculing it in the early days, and he's not even a flat earther, so there you go.
Or remember the video someone used with the I think it was a Spanish maybe comedian on some show, and they overdubbed it with all the Cavendish stuff, and it was hilarious. Yeah,
that was John Le Bon. So that got mirrored by.
That was his. Okay, I didn't know that was his. My bad.
Yeah, that was John Le Bon that did that. But yeah, there was only a handful of people that were covering it. So there was Fake Spaceman in Space, who'd got hold of this professor who had explained that one of his students had got hold of this quite small piece of equipment that had the Cavendish setup in it in a little sealed environment, and eventually explained that the student had got so frustrated with it, he'd hacked it to pieces with a saw because he couldn't get it to work. And that was kind of the narrative at the time, that Cavendish didn't work. Since then, things have evolved, and you've got people that are literally putting this parlor trick together in their bedroom and manipulating it with various bits of polystyrene and air currents.
Yeah.
Right.
We've
Shout
actually
out to Slice Barkane.
we've played that clip on the show before. It's the
Yeah,
professor
probably.
from Nottingham, isn't it, Adam?
That's fun.
6 million ways or something they're called.
Oh God, what 60?
60 million something or other. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it's the Nottingham
brilliant.
University Physics Department, and
Mm.
they go through all sorts of good kind of physics stuff, and but even he, as he's describing gravity, kind of admits, and it's something I would testify to, that when I did it, I did A-level physics for a year and I dropped it for psychology instead. But one of the basics you always do there was the dropping the balls and measuring the time, and then the Cavendish experiment. And the physics teacher said, "Look, don't worry, it won't work. It never does. It's not something that is an experiment that's replicable." And by that definition, he didn't say it's not an experiment. He said it's just you just don't replicate it. But by that definition, it is not an experiment. And
He also
outside
did.
of how Nathan can rip it a new one, from within its structure. But
Do you remember the video he did on the Foucault pendulum, where he just had a complete brain fart at the end, and it was like he'd hit a brick wall of this is bullshit. Do you remember that? We played it on the show as well.
Not seen that.
Oh, I might have to line that up for later. It's hilarious.
I can picture it.
I always have a problem with the Foucault pendulum, right? Because they say it's not attached, but it's attached to the Earth.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
attached to the hook at the top, which is attached to something to the ground.
It's attached to a frame of reference. Yeah.
Yeah.
And its frame of reference stays with the Earth. So whatever you see in,
It's load of
even if the Earth
bollocks.
was rotating, wouldn't it be relevant because it is attached to the hook at the top.
Well, they would say that the swing is going through a free reference frame, wouldn't they? But in other words, it's on a pivot point, and that makes it independent of the frame of reference that it's attached to.
But that frame of reference that it's attached to and then supposedly being out there is then the thing that would then apply an extra force to it. As that then rotated onto it, that would then rotate upon the pendulum itself, which would then cause an additional force outside of the free rotation of the Earth underneath it. That's my point. It's impossible for that pendulum, once the Earth starts rotating, the two are connected at the top, so a shear force would be applied at the top.
That was dead clever of Foucault. I mean, it's something I
Isn't
wouldn't
it?
have thought
Sorry,
of. And whenever
it
I
goes
try and think about it,
if the
you
explanation
have to
of
have
the
this idea that
Foucault
there is
pendulum
out there which
stands,
gives you
so
a
let's
reference
put
frame,
my globe head
and
hat
the
on and say,
pendulum
right,
keeps in a
it
straight
does
line with
prove
respect to
that the Earth rotates
stars.
underneath
But
that
even that's
swinging
not good enough. I talk
pendulum
to my
because
friends
it
and
is
say,
in
"All
its
these
own
stars
frame
and
of reference
galaxies
and
are
the Earth
moving
turns
around." And then
underneath.
they
That's
say,
why you
"Well,
get it
when we're put
moving
in
the
a
way it
corner, the
does.
astronomers
You go,
say,
okay.
there's the
So we
cosmic
have
background
the
radiation.
Earth
And
turning
if you're in the
underneath
right
the
reference
atmosphere.
frame, that is
Yes,
isotropic in
that's
all
how it
directions.
works. Right. So why
just
don't
like
the
the
flights take
simple-minded
different
explanation.
times in east to west, west to east then? In other words, the best debunking ever, because that in its nature is designed to prove that you have separate reference frames. Well, if you've got separate reference frames and the Earth rotates underneath the pendulum, well then obviously the Earth's going to turn underneath a plane that's definitely not attached to the Earth by a bloody hook. So yeah, the planes have got the Earth turning underneath them too, right? Oh no, it doesn't work like that for the planes. Oh, why would that be? Yeah, because it's all bollocks.
Well, George Netanyahu's point on that is that he thinks that the Earth's atmosphere goes round with the Earth, but that needs the Earth's atmosphere to be a friction material with the Earth spinning, and the atmosphere is not a friction material. So that's complete nonsense. But that's what his argument is, and it's completely disingenuous.
Well, that leaves the pendulum screwed then, doesn't it? Because if the atmosphere is as one with the Earth, then how are you getting the pendulum moving? Why would it move? They are as one, the atmosphere and the Earth turning together, aren't they? So how would you have any deviation in the pendulum? You wouldn't. So they're screwed both ways with the pendulum. So the pendulum doesn't often come up on the debate. So I've got to be honest, we get a lot more Cavendish balls than we do for Colt pendulum.
It's
Doesn't this
style
guy look
almost
like
as
an
much as.
Doesn't this guy look like an older version of Walt? He does.
So can I just quickly play this because this is the guy we're talking about. Do you think?
Give me 1 second, John, and I'll just get a screen up.
No worries. Can you see my screen?
Dad, I had no idea.
He definitely does look like an older version of you, Walt.
Well, I don't think it looks anything like you. What is his name anyway? It's
It'd be great if his first name was Walter.
no, it's Professor something or other. 60symbols.com is the website. Some of their stuff's fantastic, and this guy, brilliant. I think he's struggling with his own internal brain meshing.
Bullshit meter. Right?
Something's going on there. It's just hilarious. Adam?
Yeah, I'm good to go whenever you are, sir.
Okay. Tell me if you can hear it.
Under our feet, very slowly, and you can't notice it. And why it was such a sensation, Foucault demonstrated to people that they could actually observe the rotation of the Earth.
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought that was dead clever of Foucault. I mean, it's something I wouldn't have thought of. And whenever I try and think about it, you have to have this idea that there are stars out there which give you a reference frame, and the pendulum keeps in a straight line with respect to the stars. But even that's not good enough. I talk to my friends and say, all these stars and galaxies are moving around. And then they say, well, when we're put in a corner, the astronomers say, there's the cosmic background radiation. And if you're in the right reference frame, that is isotropic in all directions. But I just like the simple-minded explanation.
None of this makes sense.
It's a complete load of bollocks. What are you talking about? I thought that was funny.
That is based. That's polite academic. You think about it, it's a sack of shit.
Yeah.
Well, while we're sharing things, I'm tempted to throw this in the mix, but I see now it's a 20-minute video. Let me just ask everybody here. I gave it to our chat on Twitter earlier. Have you, Nathan, or have you, Anthony, seen Tesla 2.0's video about densenalate? I can't say the word. Let me go back. Deceleration and another word he's created, some kind of new vocabulation.
This is sort of motivated by
Vocabulation.
the demand of the Herschel Space Observatory.
Gravity is a hoax,
You know,
is the name of it. And
you
there's
get
a
the
lot
award
of...
Walt, you get the award for the least credible referencing of a video ever. I have no idea what you're talking
I know it's called Gravity is a Hoax. It's Tesla 2.0, and he's created these two new terms, and I'm trying to find them in the video because it's all textual. Okay, it's deceleration and densibrium. There are two words.
One of my favourite scientists.
Yes. And it's in reference to all of the things we're discussing, but it's a video I haven't fully grasped yet because of my lack of abilities with math at times. But there's lots of Cavendish in it. There's lots of density. There's lots of force and mass, and you guys would probably enjoy it a lot more than I'm enjoying it.
Stick it in the side chat and
I
let's
will
consider it
definitely
later.
throw it for you for later. But with this idea of just the different viscosities and I see relative density, I see relative acceleration, I see all kind of things in here that definitely fits in, but it's a 20-minute video and a lot of reading involved, and I know everybody has a different frame of reference when it comes to reading sometimes. So if you guys want to sit and read it for 20 minutes, we can. It would just be a long time for sure.
No, don't do 20 minutes on a video. 2 or 3 minutes is okay, but 20 minutes is a lot.
The real problem is that he wanted for a year.
I'll drop it in our chat here in Skype for everybody. I'll drop it in the other chat too for everyone later. Not now though. I don't want you watching it now. I want you watching us.
Yeah.
I know Walt's excited about that video. I've had a look at it and
it's really intriguing. I like when someone goes this far out with things as far as, I mean, he's really dug into it. And I saw John and John said Tesla, Apple, and he were having a bit of a go on this earlier. I just haven't had time to fully grasp it, as I said. I'll throw it in here for you guys, though, for sure.
Nah, that was something else. But yeah, bang it in the description because you pointed me to it minutes before we started up here. And
that's when I found it. So, and as I was kind of clicking and reading some of the things as you were saying them, they're in this.
I think he's a professor, PhD, etc., etc.
Yeah, he knows his stuff without a doubt.
But yeah, definitely something to look at. Where were we anyway? I've got that other Cavendish experiment lined up with the 60 symbols, but I can't find the bit where he's talking about his teaching assistant hacksawing it up because he got so frustrated with it. If anyone remembers whereabouts that is on the video, because that is absolutely hilarious and it just sums up the Cavendish like a treat.
Well, open the transcript and search for the word frustrated.
That's way beyond my capabilities. What transcript?
Wow, you just did YouTube like hack next level stuff. What happened?
Underneath the video where it's got the thumbs up and the thumbs down.
Yeah.
There's like an extended menu that's like next to the words save. It's like 3 dots.
All right, open transcript. All right, gotcha.
And then click into the transcript window that opens up to make it the active window. Control and F, and then that'll bring up a search box. And then just type in the word frustrated and see if it's mentioned, because that should take you straight to it.
That's awesome.
You lost me at the bit before Control F, but
so
just click into the window to make it the active window.
I should share my screen, shouldn't I? That would
go
probably be quite helpful. Let's do that. Right, so I've got the transcript open.
Yeah. So just click in the transcript window to make it active, and then Control and F.
Okay, and then what does he say?
And then type in frustrated.
I can't remember if that's the word he used.
Well, it's probably going to be. There you go. You couldn't got so frustrated in the. So that is that it there?
I don't know.
It is. Got so frustrated. That'll be it.
All right. Yeah. Let's see. Let me know if you can hear.
So just go back 10 seconds.
Okay. Where are we on? 419.
So just see at the top it says 411 set of dead balls. Click that line, that top line.
There we go. 410.
There's another set of dead balls inside there. This experiment really is very difficult.
Can you hear that or not?
Yeah.
That's the one we did.
A technician has sawed it apart, so
there he says
so
it
frustrated. And then right in the middle, there's a bit of balls inside there. This experiment really is very difficult to get to work, and a technician has sawed it apart, so because he got so frustrated. And then right in the middle, there's a bit of glass.
But Sly Sparkane got it done in his bedroom, didn't he? Bless him.
Oh yeah, with all that polystyrene. Hold on.
Yeah.
John, you can just do it by selecting the line in the transcript there. Just go back to 418.
418 here.
Yeah. Oh no, it's a bit too far ahead. Go back a little bit further.
Hold on.
Go on there. 411. Yeah, go from there.
Set of dead balls inside there.
Yeah, go on, click.
Another set of lead balls inside there. This experiment really is very difficult to get to work, and a technician has sawed it apart, so because he got so frustrated. And then right in the middle, there's a bit of glass. There's a mirror which should be suspended from a torsion wire.
It's just hilarious. This is one of his favourite experiments as well. But I think this guy's great.
Even though he can't get it to work.
No one can, apart from Sly, of course.
I like that phrase actually, guys. Get it to work.
Yeah.
Shouldn't really have to get it to
Make
work.
it comply with my desired
Space Observatory.
Oh, sorry.
You get me? That's just shocking science. It's very, very difficult to get it to come out with my desired outcome, is what he's saying.
Send them round to Slice Arcanes. He'll just pop out the styrene boards and it'll work.
Bit of static always gets it moving, doesn't it?
We got to give this guy a shout out. What was his name? Professor Knowles or something. I'm trying to look on his website. Come on, he's. You have lunch with him, don't you, Adam?
I've not met that. They're a different school they're in.
Yeah. Well, when I find his name, I'll give him a shout out. But yeah, top quality bloke.
No, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's good education. A lot of ballers could do with watching it.
Okay.
Especially Sly.
Joking aside, the problem is that they're describing it, because it's fallacious, as science. So if you read about that Cavendish experiment, go and look it up, and it will use scientific terms in the description of it. It'll be describing it in the context of science. And science is a really narrow term, as we've discussed. It's trying to establish the cause. So it's essentially just dealing with cause and effect relationships. Science is really narrow. But because it's hypothesis driven, you can validate, prove your hypothesis correct. Yes, there's a caveat. You have to do systematic experimentation, a term that gets hijacked all the time when people say, well, I've repeated my observation, and then they try and dress that up in some sort of science. And it's like, just repeating an observation doesn't mean anything. You know, in literal terms, if you observe something, you can close your eyes, open them again, and voila, observation repeated. It's amazing. But that doesn't give it scientific validity. But that bit's been hijacked from science as well. Anyway, I'll get to my point. Otherwise, I'll monologue forever. The point is that we're ripping this a new one. I mean, we're absolutely ripping Cavendish a new one, because you can take it to pieces based on its non-adherence to the scientific method. The fact that it does not establish a cause. The fact that Newton himself has said he makes no hypothesis for gravitation. You can't turn it into science. But when it gets dressed up as science by the lying religious zealots that we have on the globe-believing side of this argument, you end up with someone like me calling it pseudoscience, which is what it is. Pseudoscience being when you try and present something that is non-scientific, like an observation, as being science. And that's what flat earthers will eventually become guilty of. They'll be accused of being pseudoscientists because they're saying, this is my experiment. And they'll go, okay, well, what's your hypothesis? Oh, well, I can't actually formulate this into a hypothesis, but that's okay, because science can be anything I like it to be. And it's like, well, no, you'll just get called a pseudoscientist eventually, because that's what it is.
I think, Adam,
on that, mate,
doesn't this fit in?
Yeah, I was going to say, on that, right, guys, Mr. Savage is kindly offered this evening, and maybe we should go for a gravity break before we come back and do this, but John's kindly offered to stick his neck on the block and kind of demonstrate that his gyroscope experiment, to say it proves the Earth doesn't rotate, is pseudoscience. And we spent a long time in the week, didn't we, John, discussing what's science, what's pseudoscience, what's dietetic, and the likes. And I think there was a good understanding there of the importance, and it comes back to Nathan's statement, which I think is probably worth a read when we come back as well, that we need to validate what we're saying in the terms and the certainties in which we're giving it. And I thought it was cool the way you grasped it. After a couple of bits of head banging, you grasped the difference and why it doesn't matter, but actually it's kind of what the ballers are doing all along, which is as Nathan says, turning pseudoscience and, or turning observational stuff and trying to purport it into science, which makes it pseudoscience. But
well,
good ramble.
Yeah, you carry on rambling, mate.
No, I'm done now.
No, well, I'm sort of at a disadvantage because I haven't been listening to Nathan. I don't know what you're talking about, Adam, as per natural now. But I had some sort of fling on Wednesday. I don't think I was putting.
You've forgotten it again, haven't you?
Yeah, of course. I don't. That's why I recorded it. I don't think I put my head on a chopping block or anything. But I do remember Adam saying, "We'll hold that thought and repeat that on Friday because Nathan's gonna love it," or something along those lines. So when we get back after the break, I'll won't beat around the bush. We'll play what we recorded on Wednesday. We'd all had
Go to the tapes. Go to the tapes.
had a
We
couple
have
of
the
beers.
telemetry.
I'll
Go
miss
VT.
I'll miss the bit where Zach was snorting coke, and we'll move straight
Oh,
on
the
to.
hookers, damn it.
Or should I include that bit? I don't know. It's up to you whether you want 5 minutes or 4 minutes.
Blowing out fire. Come on.
Cut out, yeah. Cut out the hookers, and it'll be fine.
Okay, all right. So you take it away whenever you want, Josh, and we'll have that ready when we get back.
Josh,
It's a lot easier than me trying to remember it.
if I could ask all you guys to mute then, and then I'll hand over to Josh. So, off you go, Josh. I'm gone.
Shit, I was gonna mute too. Where's my cricket sounds?
Feel free to mute, mate.
No, I'm just gonna go
4
and
minutes.
jump right.
It's all right.
This is really cool. Yeah, it's only about 4 minutes. I think that's right. I'm not gonna play anything afterwards, so we can just jump right back into it. But this is a little bit of Cheyenne and her song "Gravity."